So I was asleep along with countless millions around the planet to what was actually going on in our world, dumbed down by the mainstream media propaganda that fills all of our lives. Thankfully, I had already rid myself of television at least 7 or 8 years prior to the Lord waking me up in 2009, and I think that helped with God being able to get through to me. But it's more than TV that leads us into this whole world of deception and also inhibits us from hearing God's voice. We are living in a time when we are completely surrounded by information, and information that is purposely out there to deceive us. Actually, we are in an information war. There is a war on for the hearts and minds of the people. Hillary Clinton once said, "We are in an information war and we are losing that war." And this has all been prophesied. Revelation 13:14, he deceived all the people who belong to this world. Everywhere we go, we are subjected to propaganda, and not least by those devilish little devices called smartphones that never leave our sides, that have done more to reduce the intelligence of the populace. There's nothing smart about them. They are actually dumbing us down. Researchers have actually found an association between heavy smartphone use and lowered intelligence. And there's plenty of other studies out there showing that smartphone use leads to lack of sleep because of the blue light confusing the brain into believing it's daytime, plus lazy brains, cancerous tumours, and not to mention the antisocial nature of these devices, which aids and abets the globalists in their destruction of the family and the continued fragmentation of our communities around us. We've seen it all too often, and we're guilty of it ourselves, sitting in a restaurant with a mobile in hand, checking the email before we even check out the menu. I passed by a house one evening and I saw through the window a large TV on the wall bathing an entire family in its blue light. And get this, they were all sitting there gazing hypnotically at their smartphones. They weren't even watching that TV. Friends, the globalists' mouthpiece, the mainstream media, has got us completely surrounded. We are being dumbed down, controlled and propagandised 24 hours a day. And it's in the movies too. We can't go to a movie these days without being conditioned unless we're aware of what's going on. Hollywood now exists for one simple reason: to propagandise the masses. Years ago, Bertrand Russell, the British philosopher and ardent globalist, said that of the most important methods of propaganda, the press, the cinema and the radio play an increasing part. And what an increasing part Hollywood is playing today. In recent times, Hollywood has unashamedly shown itself to be the mouthpiece of the establishment, pushing the globalist narrative. Hollywood has gone all out in opposition to whatever the Trump administration has done, bad and good. Also, just look at how the recent school shooting has been politicised and seized upon as a means to attack Trump. I don't recall such vilification of Obama when the school shootings happened under him. As I said last week, the globalists are using the political climate as leverage to install their vision of the future. Obama and his cronies have already laid the groundwork to federalise future elections. In other words, to control any future election. So goodness knows what we will see in the White House next. And I hope and pray, friends, it won't be Oprah Winfrey, who CNN and the establishment are touting for. Interestingly enough, friends, there's an influential evangelical leader who sees Winfrey as a forerunner to the harlot movement, and utterly deceived. I read that back in 2011 and I never forgot what he said. In fact, the story was reported in the Mail Online and the headline read this: Oprah Winfrey branded the Antichrist by evangelical Christian leader. But back to Hollywood, friends. To be honest, God-fearing Christians everywhere would do the whole world a holy service by defunding that evil machine, by boycotting it right now. And quite frankly, friends, why would disciples of Christ want to fund and have fellowship with this darkness anyway? All that wanton violence, killing, horror, sexual depravity on screen and also behind the screen. Yes, friends, oftentimes those gratuitous movies are created by those who behave like the characters they create on screen. The cinema or streaming media is no place for those who are called out of darkness and into his glorious light. We are living in a time when humanity is awakening. But friends, there are still so many asleep, and Christians seem to be the hardest ones to wake up as they walk around in their own little spiritual bubble in an imagined state of a coming utopia. But it's going to get a whole lot worse before it gets a whole lot better. In fact, the utopia will only come after the return of Christ and when he sets up his millennial reign, and not before in a cozy revival setting. Friends, the disciples all lived in revival, but all of them except John saw martyrdom. Persecution and tribulation go hand in hand with the Christian life. There's no escaping it. But even though many are still sleeping, the establishment are so obviously nervous and doing all they can to win back the minds of the masses as a great number are awakening. I had to laugh the other month as two totally establishment figures got together in a radio interview. Yes, friends, Barack Obama and Prince Harry. You cannot get more establishment than them, as they discussed, among many things, how people are looking for information elsewhere rather than in the mainstream. And of course, this, according to Obama, was not a good thing. I tell you, friends, they are getting desperate when they have to get establishment figures out there like that telling us what we must do and where we need to get our news from. But friends, what I had found that prior to the Lord literally having to wake me up in a night vision and downloading his words to me, I was completely asleep and believing the mainstream narrative concerning our world. I believed and accepted it all pretty much, friends, and that's because propaganda is so effective and so powerful. It's the globalists' most powerful weapon against us. Globalist puppet Adolf Hitler, through which was formed the original plan we now see in the European Union, understood perfectly well the power of propaganda and the importance of gaining mind control over the masses. He even devoted 2 chapters to the subject in his book. He said this: "The most brilliant propagandist technique will yield no success unless one fundamental principle is borne in mind constantly and with unflagging attention. It must confine itself to a few points and repeat them over and over." Friends, it was by means of carefully orchestrated propaganda techniques that Hitler would influence the people of Germany, Europe, and the world. But friends, that quote always reminds me of the news media reporting the collapse of the Twin Towers. I'll never forget the endless repetition of those planes flying into the buildings being broadcast on the television. Over and over again, they repeated the planes slamming into those buildings. It got to the point that I just had enough, and I couldn't really understand why they just kept repeating the same footage over and over again. I just had to turn the TV off, and actually thought at the time that was kind of weird that they would do that. But friends, what were they doing? They were repeating it over and over and over again, so that we got the idea, friends, that it was the planes that brought down those towers. As Hitler wrote, "This is the most brilliant propagandist technique. The mainstream news, through constant repetition, embedded the idea over and over and over on that day that it was the planes that brought those towers down." Now, friends, I've researched 9/11 extensively, and I have to say, if you honestly and open-mindedly look into it, you will find many holes in the story. Now, we will probably never get to the bottom of it, but friends, skyscrapers have never fallen due to fire, before or after, and there are many examples the world over. The towers, friends, were specifically built to withstand the impact of large passenger planes. The towers collapsed at free fall speed. This means there was no resistance. In other words, not one floor hit the other. Each floor fell before the other could hit it. There were popping sounds of explosions going on all around the building. This was witnessed by the firefighters. One firefighter even said the building collapse looked like a controlled demolition. Then there's the black plumes of smoke indicative of an oxygen-starved fire. That proves the fires cannot have reached temperatures enough to melt the steel as the official story claims. How also was it possible for a woman to be standing near the entry hole of the plane? Wouldn't she have been quickly overcome by that intense heat that was melting the steel? What about Building 7, which also collapsed and doesn't appear in the official report at all? This building collapsed due to only office fires, friends. No planes hit it. When video footage of Building 7's collapse was shown to a demolition expert who had no knowledge that this building was within the Trade Center complex, commented without doubt that that building had come down due to a controlled demolition, and then proceeded to explain why. When he was told it came down on 9/11, he just couldn't believe it, friends. You should have seen his face. There's so much more that I could say, friends, but that's a very brief summary of events just surrounding the Trade Center complex. But there's also the Pentagon mystery plane, and also the incredible disappearing plane that crashed into a field in Shanksville. So many unanswered questions. But what is for certain, friends, the globalists used this moment to significantly advance that agenda for a new world order. Surveillance of citizens was ramped up. Terrorism and the threat of it has always been used as an excuse to spy on its citizens. And also 9/11 was used, of course, as a justification for military intervention into Afghanistan and Iraq.
Eternal Radio. Sounds to energize your faith.
So wake up, wake up, wake up, are you sleepers?
Oh friends, after the Lord awakened me, I quickly learned that everything that's been prophesied in Scripture is coming to pass. The Antichrist will control the world. This person will be the face of the new world order, the face of globalism. Yes, friends, this is what is behind globalism today. It's what's behind the UN and the EU, a desire to take control of the world under one authoritarian rule, and it's all described in detail in our Bibles. A one world religion too, as prophesied in Scripture, working in tandem with the global power structure, that group of global elitists. Yes, friends, it's all in the Bible. Can you believe it? A world leader working with a religious power. It's all there in the Holy Scriptures. God breathed. He's warned us, friends. He has warned us. And what do we have today? A global elite whose tentacles spread throughout the world from Washington to Brussels, working with the religion of Islam in order to install their dictatorial power. Friends, they are using Islam to topple Europe right now. They used Islam on 9/11 to advance that agenda. And ISIS, much like Al-Qaeda, was made in the USA, an instrument of terror designed to divide and conquer the oil-rich Middle East. And that's what they're doing right now, friends. The wheels have been set in motion. Retired four-star General Wesley Clark said that just after 9/11, he was at the Pentagon, and one of the generals told him that they'd made the decision to go to war with Iraq despite there being no evidence to link them to 9/11 or Al-Qaeda. Later, that general showed him a memo that explained how the US was going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and then Iran. It's happening now, friends, and judging by the rhetoric, Iran may be next on the list. But for many, friends, the notion that these wars are wholly unjustified, or that 9/11 was a manufactured event, is impossible to entertain. They're immediately argued away as conspiracy theories, and this in turn is reinforced by the controlled mainstream media's narrative. The idea that criminal factions of the US government could have had a part to play in 9/11 is unthinkable to them. Many don't even believe there are factions within the US government, or any Western government for that matter, but this is naive to say the least. The facts are there is a shadow government, basically secret intelligence agencies that have so much power that they act without the knowledge of Congress. The other reason people can't believe 9/11 was anything other than the official story is that they just can't accept that people could be so evil. But again, friends, this is naive. And when you begin to dig, it becomes quickly plausible when you see what some of these globalists get up to behind closed doors. And we only have to look no further than Bohemian Grove to cite just one example to see that very unsavoury things have gone on down in the redwood forests of San Francisco, including a bizarre annual event called the Cremation of Care that sees a dummy, of all things, a dummy body carried on a small boat across a lake by a hooded Grim Reaper-like figure towards a giant stone owl. Friends, you couldn't make this stuff up. The programme cover for 1 year even had a picture of a baby being sacrificed in a fire. Along the lake edge, Christian crosses are lined up that burst into flame. Friends, this stuff is pure evil, and the globalists have been entertaining themselves with this charade for years. But it shouldn't surprise us that the globalists are working with Islam. Both are antichrist, and so both work well together. The philosophy behind globalism is a communistic Marxist system that at its heart is anti-God and anti-Christ. It is atheistic, as was the Soviet Union. Globalism is hostile toward Christianity, just like Soviet Russia was openly hostile. Soviet Russia tore down churches and arrested clergymen, and this, friends, should be a warning to us all. The roots of this hatred and intolerance toward Christianity lie in the essence of communist ideology. Marx said that communism begins where atheism begins. And he also said, "I wish to avenge myself against the one who rules above." And again, in a poem, he tragically wrote, "Thus heaven I've forfeited, I know it full well. My soul, once true to God, is chosen for hell." And Lenin stated, "We do not believe in God," and said that any flirtation with a God is the most inexpressible foulness and a shameful infection. George Soros, one of the masterminds behind the push towards this modern-day communist Marxist globalism, is on the record for saying that he does not believe that God exists. And this, my friends, is why evolution is being taught as fact rather than theory. It is another weapon being used in an attempt to supplant God, remove God out of society, uproot Judeo-Christian values, and help pave the way for globalism, the Antichrist system. The Bible is detailed. It's like reading the daily news. The surveillance society springing up all around us, much of which has been installed because of this phantom war on terror, is leading to the mark of the beast as prophesied by the Apostle John. Revelation 13:17, and the second beast required all people, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their forehead, so that no one could buy or sell unless he had the mark, the name of the beast, or the number of its name. Here is a call for wisdom. Let the one who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and that number is 666. Yet again, friends, the Bible has prophesied this. The cashless society is the beginning of the mark of the beast. Once cash has been eliminated, it will be economic tyranny for the people of the world. The banks, controlled by the globalists, will finally have the people enslaved and in the palm of their hands.